For Session Update, I'm Shannon Lurkey. At a press conference on Tuesday, lawmakers and advocates pushed bipartisan legislation that would reform the prior authorization process for drug therapies. Representative Rod Hamilton has multiple sclerosis and is using his own experience of being denied a drug therapy by a pharmacy benefit manager to illustrate the need for reform and transparency. The bill has bipartisan support and has been heard in the Senate, but not in the House. Here's that press conference.
First of all, welcome everybody, and thank you for taking the time out to come and hear our side of the issue. One, I'd like to thank all the supporters. As you can see over here, we have about close to 50 different entities, professional entities that are on board and support this piece of legislation as well. You know what, I have a really nice speech that I put together with the help of others, but I tell you what, the problem with this whole scenario, I believe, in the heart of the matter, and forgive the pun, but the heart of the matter is poverty of the human heart. You know, I believe we collectively have forgotten that the common good is greater than the individual. And this is becoming about me, but it's not about me. It isn't. It's greater than that. One individual has one story, and here's the disgusting side of this whole thing. My story is I cannot get a prescription filled, even though I pay 100% of the cost for this prescription, and I have a prescription from my doctor, who's a world-renowned neurologist from the Mayo Clinic. I cannot get it filled. But here's the most disgusting part of this. Last night at 10:31 p.m., I received a text message with contact information of the PBM who can help me get my prescription filled. And if that doesn't outrage people, I mean, think about that. I'm a legislator that is raising an issue, trying to get a bill heard, and then because I believe that I'm making a ruckus about all of this, all of a sudden that I'm receiving the help that I deserve. But what about the others? You know, Mary, we did an interview yesterday, right? And I posted that on my Facebook page. And I had a number of likes, but I also had a number of comments, right? And there's a couple who are dear friends of mine that I met through Farm Bureau. And I met them when we went out to Washington, D.C. together to discuss ag issues. And Jonathan was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis a few years ago. And what's even more tragic to that story is their daughter was diagnosed with MS too, right? And so she doctored at the Mayo Clinic, and they were able to get her MS under control to the point where she and her husband had this beautiful child. So Jonathan and Carolyn have a beautiful baby girl, right? Or a beautiful granddaughter. Well, they've taken an opportunity, they moved to Kentucky, and now they're being challenged because she's on Tysabri for her multiple sclerosis. They're being challenged now, and she's not going to be able to access that treatment because they want her to start back on beta-ferrons or whatever the case may be. I mean, I've been through Copaxone, I've been through Rebif, I've been on steroids, I've been on chemotherapy, you know, and I'm on Tysabri. I've lost vision in both eyes. This is real people. And here's the harsh reality of this. I am not receiving a hearing, and the reason I believe is because we will win. That is why we are not receiving a hearing. And you know, folks have been contacting me and talking about big, powerful lobbyists on the other side. Well, if they're that powerful, they'd have the damn debate. They're a bunch of cowards hiding behind a gavel. And that's the harsh reality. This is real people. Real people. And so I apologize for going off script here, but it's a great, it's a great speech. You can read it, read it on your own time. But again, this bill, I'll tell you, it doesn't go far enough. I'll be the first to say that. You know, what we're basically asking for is if you enter into a contractual agreement, sign a contract, well then abide by it. That's what we're asking for. Right now it's lopsided. You have the doctors and the patients, we have to fulfill our end of the contract. We have to abide by it. But the PBMs, the drug dealers, they don't have to, right? They don't have to. They can change it anytime they want. And that is wrong. And that's why I'm here today, and that's why I'm, you know, fighting the fight. And believe me, I'm willing to have this debate. I'm willing to have this fight. So with that, I apologize for going off script, and I'll turn it over to the professionals. Thank you.
Well, good morning. That is a hard act to follow. Unfortunately, it's not an act, it's the truth. I'm Senator Carla Nelson. I live in Rochester and represent Olmsted County. I'm glad to be the Senate chief author of Senate File 593 because it is focused on ensuring patients with chronic diseases that they get the medication they need, and it puts the needs of the patient first. For the past 3 sessions, this legislation has had unanimous, bipartisan support in the Senate. In each of the Senate committees in which it has heard, it has sailed through with strong bipartisan support. This includes the hearing that we had last week, where every member who spoke from both sides of the aisle expressed their strong support for this bill. And opponents will tell you that this legislation will explode health care costs. But that is simply not true. The bill allows the plans great flexibility to make changes to their formulary and benefit classes of drugs. And I'd also point out that prior authorization, as it exists today, is already expensive. You can ask any physician, APRN, PA, or pharmacist, and they will tell you the cost and the burden of prior authorization is enormous. Physicians and nurses and clinic staff spend hours every day chasing approval of drugs for their patients' needs. And estimates by the widely respected Health Affairs puts the cost of administrative work, with the bulk of it being prior authorization, at more than $80,000 per physician per year. It's an extraordinary expense, an administrative paperwork expense. And even small clinics have staff dedicated to just doing prior authorization requests and repeals. At the heart of this legislation, it is a consumer protection bill. It simply asks that health plans live up to the same contract that we as premium payers are paying for. We both must be obligated to the contract, not just one side. In many cases, consumers select a health plan based on the availability of the drugs that they require. I went through this helping my mother-in-law a few years ago, and it was very difficult to determine which of her drugs were on that formulary chart, and then to find out that they change midway through the enrollee's contract year. For so many medical conditions, particularly those chronic conditions, some that we heard about today, others like mental illness, epilepsy, even the slightest change in the patient's drug therapy can have significant impact on a patient's health. We've seen this also in our family and other areas where there's been great work to try and get a mixture of, to try and find out exactly what's working best, and then to have to change it midterm is very difficult. It's dangerous. Nothing in this bill prevents the use of prior authorization. In fact, nothing in this bill would preclude the health plans from changing their formularies. I think that's an important point. It simply states that the patient who is currently taking a particular drug that's on the formulary cannot be required to change the drug during their enrollment year. Very simple. For all other enrollees, the plans can change their formulary as needed. So again, this is a basic consumer protection bill. It is not a costly bill, And it is the right solution. We cannot be asking patients to have to change drugs because a PBM thinks that they should. We need to have both parties honor the contract. That's all we're asking. That's what contract law is. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is David Egerton. I'm a family physician practicing in the Mayo Clinic in Austin, Minnesota, and I'm here as the president of the Minnesota Medical Association. Fixing medication prior authorization processes in Minnesota has been a top priority in our association for the past 3 legislative sessions. We hear about it from doctors across the state in groups large and small. Physicians want and need this reform because we see how it affects our patients every day. This is for our patients, not necessarily for physicians. Many of my patients, particularly those with chronic conditions such as mental illness, arthritis, and epilepsy, select their health plan based upon whether the plan covers a drug that currently is working for them. These patients are bound by the terms of the contract that they have entered into with the health plan. And yet nothing in the law prevents a health plan from requiring the patient to switch to a new drug, even in the middle of the contract year. Each and every one of my patients is unique. Certain drugs work best for certain patients, and that's doubly true for many chronic conditions like arthritis or multiple sclerosis. I'd like to share with you a brief story about a patient who I began seeing who had an unusual headache history. I had her seen by one of our headache specialists, and she had what was called cluster headaches. She had been tried on multiple medications that were not effective, but she was placed on a fairly common anti-inflammatory medication, and she became headache-free. Unfortunately, the health plan changed, and that medication was no longer authorized. She could not afford the out-of-pocket expense. Her headaches began reoccurring because we put her back on medications that she had been on previously, and she told me they will not work. After the 4th appeal, we got the medication reauthorized for her to take, but during that time, she had 2 emergency room visits with added costs and added tests. Again, that's not in the best interest of our patients. Physicians want to prescribe the most cost-effective treatments for their patients, but when a physician or other practitioner finds the right drug therapy that works for an individual patient, switching to a new drug because their insurer now requires a change can risk that patient's health. This is precisely what Representative Hamilton's and Senator Nelson's bills are attempting to correct. Again, this is for our patients. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Sue Abderholden, and I'm Executive Director of NAMI Minnesota, National Alliance on Mental Illness. And I frankly also come here because I have family members who live with a mental illness. Mental illnesses affect 1 in 5 people, and without proper and effective treatment, they can seriously impact a person's ability to do well in school, work, relationships, and frankly, in life. And it can take a long time, sometimes way over a year, to find the right medication, the right combination of medications, and the right dosages. Every person responds differently to these medications. And once the right ones are found that actually stabilize the individual so that they can get their life back, you don't want to make changes. You want to hold on to what works. So let's pause a second to remember what happens when someone's symptoms of mental illnesses are not controlled. 911 calls, police responses, crisis services, hospitalization, jail, homelessness, and suicide. The costs, both financial and human, of not providing effective treatment are great. And yet there's hesitancy in requiring, at the very least, to allow you to stay on your medication despite formulary changes during a plan year. And I want to remind everyone that people with the most serious mental illnesses are typically on Medicaid and on managed care plans. They have to follow that plan's formulary and not the state's fee-for-service formulary, and it has caused many problems. One mom wrote to me after struggling for 5 years to find the medications that worked for her beautiful and talented daughter, over 10 different medications, and they finally found one. She said, she's back. She is back, and she's going back to school. Except now the insurance company isn't going to pay for it, and the prior authorization was denied. Why should a young woman in her 20s be denied the opportunity to have a real and productive life because of a health plan's limited formulary? Why would we force people with mental illnesses to change medications that are working? Requiring plans to, at the very least, keep the same formulary during the year is the minimal, and I want to say minimal action that the legislature should take. Changes in formularies threaten people's recovery and leads to poor outcomes. NAMI pleads with the legislature to please hear and pass this bill. Thank you.
Representative Hamilton was asked about the rationale given for the change in his prescription medication.
Follow the money. Follow the money. And here's the part that I really struggle with as a legislator. You know, it's a citizen legislature, right? And so you have people of all walks of life serving, wonderful people serving. And we are not experts in everything, right? And when it comes to healthcare, you have the doctors. I'm going to bring you into this, right? Okay. You have the doctors, in many cases, pointing fingers at the insurance companies pointing fingers at the pharmaceutical companies and pointing fingers at the now the PBMs, and the PBMs pointing fingers at the doctors. And they get us legislators spinning in a circle. We're chasing our tails, trying to find answers. You know, follow the money. We need complete transparency in the healthcare system.